Okay, honest show of hands, no jokes, be real for a second. How many of you have actually watched this show? Class was a Doctor Who spin-off released in 2016 from the mind of Patrick Ness, and I have thoughts on this show. In the context of the actual Doctor Who, 2016 was a rough year. In terms of show, we have no show. We had one episode, The Return of Dr. Mysterio. Let's just say, things were looking dire. Being perfectly honest, I thought the show was gonna get cancelled. People don't talk about it now, but this was probably the most unsure things have been behind the scenes in the modern era of Doctor Who. Behind maybe the start of production on Flux and the COVID times, which I could do a whole separate video on, to be honest, because Chris Chibnall, the legend, came in clutch and legit saved Doctor Who multiple times. Part of the reason I love Flux so much. But I remember that when this came out, basically the whole talk of the town was Doctor Who ain't cutting it no more. It fell off plus ratio. Now I didn't think this. As you guys know, I have always loved Doctor Who, and even though I wasn't the warmest on Series 9, I did still like it, as I do like all of Doctor Who. And unlike most of the community, I didn't hate or even dislike Hellbent, so I wasn't left on such a sour impression as everyone else. This episode sucks though. And imagine being me, waiting all year and the year before just for this. And that shitty ass Pokemon Go joke. Wow, so timely. Fuck off, man. But all hope was not lost, because there was class. Yeah, all hope was lost. No one cared about this show. Now, I've heard rumors that there was like a class section of the Doctor Who fan show, when that was still a thing, that got severe hate messages about class that really demotivated them. I was there, and I did go back and retroactively check. That was not the case. There was not hate per se, more so indifference. This show flopped. I think that's what truly demotivated a lot of these guys. I mean, trust me, it sucks when you put something out and you see just no one cares. Trust me, it's basically what happens every time I upload. And what I imagine happened is that one of the only like 11 comments that they would get would be like a negative one, and that would just really stick with them. And I get it, like it's fair to feel that way. That sucks. But the truth is, there wasn't an avalanche of hate. Most people didn't even know that it existed. But why did it flop? Well, I think it can be traced all the way back to the concept. What is Class? Class is a British coming-of-age story set in Coal Hill Academy, not school, centered around the sixth formers who go there and their alien connections. It's meant to be a more mature show, so we're talking more Torchwood than Sarah Jane, but it isn't as playful as Torchwood. This show is gritty and takes itself completely seriously 100% of the time. Tonally, it is nothing like Doctor Who. This show is completely different, which leads some people to theorize that this show was originally something else, an original work that was then brought into the Doctor Who world. According to some people, it went something like this. Hi, I'm Patrick Ness, a writer who makes British coming-of-age stories. I want to make a new show, but with sci-fi elements. Hey, we're the BBC. We're not gonna make this new show because there's not enough interest. Oh no! Hey, Doctor Who, do you mind if I borrow your IP so I can make this? Sure thing, boss. And they all lived happily ever after. Truthfully, I don't think this happened. Number one, I don't think Stephen Moffat would be that haphazard with the brand. Now, I know this show wasn't a success, but I just don't think he'd be so careless, knowing what I do about him from decades worth of interviews. I think Patrick Ness came up to him with an idea for a Doctor Who spin-off, and they just made it. I don't think that there's any of this extra background stuff of it originally not meant to be connected to Doctor Who. The problem being, it's not connected enough to Doctor Who. The glaring and most obvious flaw is the fact that this is Coal Hill Academy and not school. Despite there being a clear shift and focus put on Coal Hill School in Series 8 after the 50th anniversary special established Clara as a teacher there. Setting all this up for none of it to matter or carry over to the show is a baffling decision. Also, and I feel comfortable saying this because I mentioned it in a previous video, I despise the focus put on Coal Hill School in Series 8. I hated it, all of it. It's incredibly unappealing to me. I don't like it, and I didn't like watching it. Yes, this is a personal thing to me, but I have to mention it because it's a major factor. So for the element I hated probably the most in the whole 2010s of Doctor Who, being the core focus of a spin-off, and it not even being connected enough fully to the show to justify it, safe to say, I was not on board. From the get-go, I hate this concept, for personal taste and also because it's just boring. Who cares? Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures are incredibly smart in that they are branches off from characters that people actually care about into a demand that people actually have. Doctor Who as a family show has a split audience between adults and kids, so it makes sense to have a show aimed at adults and another show aimed at kids. Class seems to be aimed at in between. And I don't know why. A lot of people say they would have rather had a spin-off about the Paternoster gang, and while I guess it would have been a more interesting concept than this, these guys just would never work for a spin-off. The limits on potential storytelling are massive, it would be too expensive, there's not enough demand, and as I explained, there isn't a clear audience demographic for it. This is just a really strange time to make a Doctor Who spin-off. Now, Doctor Who is intrinsically linked to this show and its premise, but we have no reason to care because there is no crossover, apart from one which we will get onto later in the video. The bodies that come for them are a result of the Doctor and his time travelling, and for some reason or another, he is not dealing with them himself. This premise is shaky, and I must give props to Torchwood especially, whose main gimmick of the Rift provided an effortless explanation to all of the shenanigans going on and why the group is necessary in the first place. Unlike Class. Now, Class is only 1 season long and 8 episodes in total, so compared to all of the other spin-offs we have talked about, it's truly not that much. But believe me when I say, there actually is a surprising amount in each episode. First, I suppose I should talk about the characters. Charlie is more or less the main character, and he's an alien posing as a human student. Okay, seems about standard. He is the Prince of the Rhodians and the last of his species. Oh. He was rescued by the Doctor because all of his kind were killed by the Shadow King. By the Shadowkin, who are the main villains of the series. Immediately, too much. Having an alien kid slash fish out of water is standard and pretty great, no problems there. This prince stuff, however, is too much. It's kind of ridiculous as well. I think it would be more interesting if he was just a random citizen who escaped, or if there was anything interesting there with his dynamic with the Doctor. For the record, we don't see the Doctor saving him, but it is implied heavily and confirmed later on. The character is also stiff and boring. When compared to Luke Smith, who I would think is the closest equivalent, it is no contest. He isn't very endearing like Luke is, and he doesn't really have much of a personality either. No hate to the actor, of course. I actually think he's pretty good. Ram is the next character, and probably the best out of the bunch. He's like Clyde, except not funny. But I don't know, I just kind of like him. April is a character in this show. Tanya Adiola is a child prodigy genius who is younger than the rest, although she doesn't look it. Similarly to every character in the show, they don't make an effort to make her likable in the slightest.
My dad tried to kill me when I was 8. But you've got your mum up walking again? Typical white person happy ending.
You're kind of just supposed to latch onto her because of her backstory, but I don't find child geniuses very inherently endearing, and the actress's performance is one of the only ones in the show I actively don't like. Probably least favourite character, to be honest. Or at least she would be, if not for Mrs. Quill. She's a teacher, except she's secretly an alien, and also the last of her species called a Quill, who are the enemies of the Rhodians. You understand? She is insufferable. And clearly meant to be the best part of the show. Apparently, some people actually like this character, but keep in mind, those are people who watched Class. So, do they really count? I really don't like her. And the show expects you to love her, which makes it even worse. Now, I know a lot of people who watch my channel don't live in the UK, but I think I should explain this because otherwise you may be a little lost. You may have noticed that I keep calling this show a British coming-of-age story because, well, that's what it is. This show is most definitely made for a British audience, and if you were watching TV around this time, this was basically what the program list was flooded with. This style isn't quite what it's like elsewhere in the world, where, you know, TV is actually entertaining. Now, I'm a big fan of a regular coming-of-age story because, you know, usually they're sweet and fun and enjoyable. But a British coming-of-age story is the complete opposite of that. In British movies, and especially television, there is an obsessive adherence to realism. Realism. Way more than other parts of the world. It's kind of like the British style, and it's boring. Very boring. Not fun. Not fun to watch. Instead of making the show sensationalized with heightened emotions, everything needs to be drab and gritty. which means all the mentions to sex have to be incredibly gross and unpleasant. The violence isn't fun nor exciting, it's simply gruesome and sad. The atmosphere of the show in general is just unappealing to me, although I know to a lot of British people that probably isn't the case. I have no idea why though, but they wouldn't make it if people didn't like it, right? I think what it really comes down to is if you like that style. If you do, you'll probably actually like this show. If you don't, you'll be like me. Now I don't want to be shitting on this show. It does have its pros. Its production values far surpass Torchwood and the Sarah Jane Adventures, and dare I say the writing is superior to the first season of their respective shows as well. I think we should finally dive into it with the first episode of Class, For Tonight We Might Die. This episode is all about getting everyone in place, but there are some shocking moments, like when Ram gets his leg chopped off. From here on out, Ram is pretty sad. But guess who else shows up? It's none other than Doctor Who. The 12th Doctor, played by Peter Capaldi, appears in the first episode of Class, and only the first episode. It goes to show how much I love Doctor Who, that even in this episode, when all this crazy shit is happening, even then, it is still cool for me to see the Doctor turn up and do Doctor things. But I definitely think the Doctor is majorly out of character here. Number one, he will not task people to do anything, especially not children. He also acts kind of dickish to these clearly traumatized sixth formers, and in general is maybe a bit too rough around the edges, especially for the Doctor of this time, which should be way after Series 8. He doesn't share a good rapport with any of these characters, and it is kind of sad to see him here only for him to be wasted so thoroughly. I just wish he showed up more. I feel it's tradition to be generous to the first episode of each of these spin-offs, and even though I could care less about the Shadowkin in concept and design, I will rate this episode a 6 out of 10. Maybe only for Peter Capaldi's inclusion. My GOAT. Episode 2 is not as good, and maybe the least interesting episode of the season. It's the only one which feels a bit freak of the week, and when the rest of the series is so tightly serialized, it falls a bit flat. This episode is pivotal in the series arc, but by comparison... Night Visiting, on the other hand, is actually quite unique. Kind of reminds me of one of those low-budget horror films you see pop up from time to time. You ever see that one about the family that gets locked in at Christmas and surrounded by sentient cassette tapes? What's that movie called again? Whatever it is, it reminds me of that. These alien vines wrap around all of East London and show ghostly apparitions to people in order to lure them out. It is successfully unpleasant to watch, but still my brain struggles with the logistics of this. So although the premise is interesting and sound, I still don't like it. The next two episodes are a two-parter, and I actually really like this. Throughout all of the first part, you see these petals begin to multiply and gradually grow throughout the episode, until the end where it's revealed that these plants actually eat people. Until the end where it's revealed that these plants actually eat people. Now that is cool. It's like that Sarah Jane Adventures episode, The Gift, but better. That is mostly saved for part 2, however. Part 1 is mostly focused on April, struggling with her connection to the King of the Shadowkin, otherwise known as the Shadow King, something which I could not give a shit about. I couldn't even force myself. They flopped this aspect hard because it's a key part of the season and it is just so lame. Execution wise, it is probably better than it is in idea form, which is the worst compliment I can give it, because it means if they were actually given something good, maybe this could have been a pleasant experience. Episode 6, however, is the highlight of the season. Now, what I'm about to say might surprise you, but I think this show justifies its whole existence with this one episode. It's actually pretty good. Detained features all of the characters actually together for a change in detention. They are then taken to an unknown location by this small meteor that compels whoever touches it to give forth their deepest and darkest secrets. When you have a cast of characters all holding information back, you can imagine that this is actually quite an interesting premise. The actors really get to show their stuff here, especially Charlie. See, I told you that actor was pretty good. And for the first time in the season, I feel the actual emotion in the same way as the characters. Let's fucking go! Now, I want to make it clear that I don't think this episode is perfect. But by Class's standards, this is pretty damn great. And honestly, if you compare it to anything from the first season of Torchwood or Sarah Jane, it almost blows it all out of the water. But should I say it? You know what? I will. This episode's fire. The next one is not as good. That's not to say it's bad, although I think it is. The Metaphysical Engine, or What Quill Did, is a bold episode. It is trying a lot. This episode is a flashback and takes place concurrently to the previous episode and explains the cliffhanger of Mrs. Quill at the end of said previous episode. Now, as I said, Mrs. Quill is my least favorite part about this show, and this whole episode is focused around her and only her. So I think you can guess what my opinions on this episode are. But I do think it's important to note that this episode isn't all bad. In fact, I think the concepts presented in this one are good. I think there's a lot here that's actually pretty good. Ironically, unlike before, it's the opposite, where I think it's the execution that lets it down. They were way too overambitious with this one, and to be honest, I can see how some people could like it, but I don't. I wouldn't say it's a letdown per se. Instead, I think this as a follow-up is simply not my cup of tea. And guess what? We're already at the finale. Episode 8 is called The Lost, and it's a flop. Again, they bite off more than they can chew here, and the conclusion is just underwhelming. And this isn't even mentioning that the show ends on not one, but 2 unresolved cliffhangers, with April switching bodies with the Shadow King, and the governors setting up an event called The Arrival involving the Weeping Angels. Dun dun dun! It amounted to nothing! It amounted to nothing. Why didn't you do this earlier? Why didn't you do this in the actual show? Why wait to season 2? Just do this shit now. We have like little to no connections to Doctor Who outside of brief lines in basically in all of these episodes. You couldn't have snuck a Weeping Angel in there? That would have been fucking awesome. Instead, all we get is this tease. Did I mention I don't care about the Shadowkin? This cliffhanger is ridiculous and laughable. And what is with every Doctor Who spin-off ending on a cliffhanger? How many times can I repeat the abrupt ending joke? Class is surprisingly good. Yeah, I bet you weren't expecting that. I have been shitting on this show non-stop. And that's because, well, I don't like it. It's not my thing. It just isn't. But that doesn't make it bad. In fact, I think this is actually quite a rather well-made show. But it doesn't fit in Doctor Who. There isn't any whimsy or playfulness that a lot of these episodes' concepts need. And it certainly isn't as mature as Torchwood Children of Earth. There aren't enough links back to the canon, the concept itself is uninspired and drab. There is infinite potential in the words Doctor Who spin-off, and you chose this. The punchlines write themselves. Literally, Class is the punching bag of Doctor Who because it is such an easy reach. Anyone who knows this thing existed knows how to make fun of it, even if they hadn't watched it, because it's that easy, including me, apart from the not watching it part. This show is so easy to dunk on. A lot of the warning signs were so blatantly obvious from early on, but watching it as it progresses, and especially as it progresses into something actually interesting, I can't help but find it tragic. Not to say that I would have really cared for a season 2. There is interesting stuff here. Maybe not my cup of tea, but interesting nonetheless. Looking at Patrick Ness's other stuff, I can tell it's not really my thing, and I think that's what Class was destined to be as well. It's a well-made, not awful piece of crap, and I would ask what your thoughts on it were below, but I know none of you have ever watched this. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Sorry this video took so long to come out, it was a bit of a doozy. If you want to help support the channel, you can click the join button below to become a channel member and gain access to a multitude of special perks and benefits. As I said, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one.